The following program is a production of Tim Jackson, who assumes full responsibility for its content. The content of this program does not represent the views of FCTV, which serves as a forum for community expression and offers TV training, production facilities, and channel time to all Falmouth residents and organizations.
Welcome back to West Falmouth Library's historical presentation series, The History and Heritage of West Falmouth. I'm Tim Jackson, your host for this presentation. Bertha goes whaling. Today, we will explore the history of Captain Hamlin and his family, and his house here in West Falmouth. Our focus will be the dramatic story of his family's adventures at sea, and told through the recollections of his daughter, Bertha.
And without further ado, here's the director of the West Falmouth Library, Lois Hiller.
Welcome to the West Falmouth Library. Thank you for coming to this program tonight. Tonight is about the Hamlin family, and we're going to have a reading of Bertha Goes Whaling, which happened which is in the time period of about 150 years ago. This is one of the programs in our Go Local grant, which is a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, but administered by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. So it's a 2-year grant, and over the next 2 years, we're going to be doing programs that focus on very local history, the history of West Falmouth and the changes in West Falmouth. We already did some programs about the Quakers. They're the ones that founded and started West Falmouth because they were persecuted in both Boston and Sandwich, so they came here to start the town. Some of the programs will be about particular founding families. Some of the programs will be about women and how that has changed, about the economy, about the ecology of West Falmouth, about the fishing and the different industries that people have done here. But the purpose is to connect to our community, particularly using our archives and historical documents. And if you go out after the program and look at the Hamlin House, that's the house where they lived when they came back from whaling. And Bill Hendel had a model built of the Caleb Hamlin House, which is right up and across the street a little bit. So this is talking about right here. It happened just about 150 years ago, and I hope you really enjoy our program tonight and continue to come to our other programs about West Falmouth. Thank you.
Okay, that was Lois Hiller. She's the library director. I'm Renee Voorhees. Together we wrote the grant that she referred to, and so I'm responsible for getting the archives together, help with program planning, and setting up a schedule for the evening. So I'm going to give you a brief history of the Hamlin family. And we're just talking about, any of you that are from West Falmouth know, there are more Swifts than you can count in a year. There are more Hamlins, there were intermarriages everywhere. So trying to sort out which family line individuals belong to takes hours. So we are concentrating just on Captain Caleb Hamlin, who was born in 1793, and his 2 sons, John Copeland Hamlin, who was Bertha's father, and Captain Caleb O. Hamlin, who was John's brother and Bertha's uncle. Okay, so we'll start with the father. Captain Caleb Hamlin was born in 1793 in Forestdale in Sandwich. He died in 1853 at the age of 59. Captain Caleb Hamlin was a master mariner. His last voyage was in a merchant ship to Cuba in 1824. Upon its return, At the Isle of Pines, it was chased by pirates. So next we'll go to his son, John, who was born in 1829, a whaler like his father. He began his seafaring life at age 20, and this is Bertha's father. His first voyage was aboard the bark Lagoda, then 3 aboard the Congress, and his last voyage was aboard the bark Islander. This is the voyage that Bertha May Hamlin wrote of in Bertha Goes Whaling. John died in 1875 at age 46. During the last 2 years of his life, he ran a store in Falmouth. According to Dale in the history of Barnstable County, he was an upright man and a mason, and his humane and social qualities so softened the sterner and courageous elements of his nature that his decease was greatly mourned by a large circle of friends. He was charitable without ostentation, mild yet decisive, and a true friend and counselor. John and his wife Maria had 9 children. Bertha was number 5. So his last child was born after he died. That was Leonella, who was the first librarian here at the West Falmouth Library. Captain Caleb O. Hamblin was John Copeland's brother. He was born in 1835, 6 years later. At age 10, he began work in the glass factory in Sandwich. 5 years later, at age 15, he went to sea. During his career, he made a number of voyages as mate and captain. His last voyage was as a captain and half owner of the brig Henry Trowbridge, and they went off on a sealing and whaling voyage off Cape Horn. He is best known for surviving death in the mouth of a whale. The story, as quoted once again in Deo's History of Barnstable County, goes like this. It's also printed on the poster in the back of the room. While as second mate of the Congress, he, Captain Caleb O., made fast to a sperm whale off the coast of Australia, and as he stood in the bow of the boat, lance in hand for another throw, the monster, with open mouth, struck the bow of the boat with such forces as to break it in. And Captain Hamlin was thrown partly into the pair of jaws that were 22 feet long. Captain Hamlin's right leg was wholly in the whale's mouth, and he astride the jaw was carried down nearly 100 feet underwater. With wonderful presence of mind, he took 2 turns of the lance line around his hand, the other end being fast to the boat. At the end of the downward ride, the length of the rope, the jerk came, and as he had anticipated, and although his strain to his arm was terrible, the limb was not torn off, as he feared, but with an ugly wound along the leg from a single tooth. He was drawn from the whale's mouth and into the boat. Or so the tale goes. The model replica of the house is the house of Captain Caleb O. Hamblin, and it's located across the street at 606 West Falmouth Highway. And that is the model of the house you're going to see around the corner. And in 1880, there were also 2 other Hamlin homes. The house right next door to the library was a Hamlin home, and then the one further up towards the market, just this side of the market, down a couple, was another Hamlin house. And so Bertha, when she talked about loving the Hamlin house and loving West Falmouth, she mentioned that she could play in the woods forever behind her house. So I think when she talks about loving the Hamlin houses, she probably loved all 3, and I can imagine the Hamlin kids just running in a big circle all day long. So that's the story of the Hamlin family. And now, Bertha May Hamlin Boyce. a character. Some of you knew her. I'll give you a chance at the end to tell a few stories that you might still have about her. She was born in 1867. Think about that for a minute. All the history this lady lived. She died in 1968 at the age of 101. Which is surprising, except also when you look at the displays around the corner, you will see that Bertha's mother, after birthing 9 children, lived to be 75. So there was longevity in that line of the family. She was the one who raised $50 to establish the Lending Library here in this new building in 1879. She presided as the president of the West Falmouth Library Association for 47 years. And then, besides that, she also served as children's librarian, cookie lady for everybody in West Falmouth. She always had cookies available for the children. She established an attic museum in her home where she displayed all of the treasures that had been brought back from her whaling adventure. She married James Boyce in 1904. Bertha was also responsible for the management of the tag factory. And we are talking more about the industry in West Falmouth in February. But Bertha's never going to go away. It seems like she's present at anything we plan. But this is my favorite story. In the summer, once the tourist industry began, which is probably between 1880 and 1890, traffic, population really picked up. And, people were driving, but Bertha had a Model A, I'll get into that a little bit later. But people were driving up and down West Falmouth Highway so fast that she used to stand in the middle of the highway and stop traffic. Yeah. And finally, the selectman in Falmouth told her she couldn't do that anymore, and she replied that she would do it until they provided somebody else to do it for her. And sure enough, a summer policeman was hired to manage traffic on this highway. It's too bad we can't have it here again. I know, absolutely. So that's a brief introduction to Bertha, and in the back we have a picture of her and a picture of the bark, the Islander, that she traveled on. But I don't know if any of you know Clara Lombard Hennessy Gilbert. Okay, so Clara wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't be here. She and Bertha shared a birthday. They were best friends. Clara refers to her as my twin. And Mrs. Bertha Hamlin Boyce was known for many things. Okay. She owned a Model A Ford, and every Friday she drove it into town for her shopping. George West, another resident here for a long time, always said everyone got off the road at 10 a.m. on Friday because Bertha was driving to town. Clara says, I remember her as a very safe driver. She may have been a little slow, like 10 miles an hour. It was always a memorable event. She had a wide group of friends. She was both revered and loved. Every Thursday, the village children knew Bertha and her friends baked cookies. The cookies were many and varied. If we were very good and very polite, she invited us in for tea, 1 or 2 at a time. And she would tell us her stories of growing up in West Falmouth or riding a sea turtle on her father, Captain Hamblin's whaling ship deck. Other seafaring captains from Falmouth took their families with them at times. I should mention that both John Quain and Caleb O. Hamlin took their wives with them, and each wife gave birth to 3 children on board those whaling ships. Okay. So, other seafaring captains from Falmouth took their families with them. Bertha was the only one I remember talking about the adventure. She loved to tease me. She grew up in West Falmouth and went to the village school. She and my grandfather, Frank Lombard, were classmates. She loved to tell me that he would dip her beautiful long blonde braids into his inkwell. She thought that was daring, and she was flattered. She was proud that she had long blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes. I left for college in 1959. I returned for the holidays. I remember returning to see Bertha Goes Whaling proof spread out on our dining room table, and my mother, Anna Hennessy, busy making corrections to the story and placing the pictures and one and then another for best effect and purpose. My mom attended Massachusetts School of Art, and I think the composition of the book showed my mother's talent for artistic placement and composition. I recall visiting Bertha in her final time when she resided at the North Falmouth Nursing Home. She did not get out of bed, but she was as alert and entertaining and caring as I always remembered her. Her goal was to live to be 100. She thought that was a very fine age for a lady. When she realized it was not going to happen, Mom would cheer her up by saying, "Bertha, we will always remember that you lived to be in your 100th year." And so she did. The National Geographic had hoped to push the story, but they required a ship's captain log to verify what Bertha remembered. I am so happy the West Falmouth Library is honoring Bertha and this wonderful true story about her adventures. This also honors the many other sea captain families of West Falmouth. I treasure my picture of West Falmouth whaling Captain Hoaxie, who lived across the street from the market with his wife and 2 children. Reading Bertha Hamlin's true story can be a wonderful holiday tradition. And this is in Clara Lombard Hennessy Gilbert's words. All right, we've done the father, we've done the brothers, we've done Bertha, and now Lois is going to give us an introduction to the Hamlin family home.
This is about the house that the model of the house is in the lobby of the library right now. And people love this house and love being in this house. The Hamlin House, standing so proudly on the bank of the east side of the road. In back, we owned about a mile of oak wood. In front was a lovely view of Buzzards Bay. There was a driveway on each side of the house. On the north, it was shaded by very tall trees, which were a landmark for fishermen out in the bay. We had an apple orchard on the north side. On the south side, there were huge chestnut trees that were very beautiful when in blossom and a joy to the children when the chestnuts were ripe. There were also pear trees, cherry trees, and a flower garden on the south side of the drive. The Hamlin House was built before the war of 1812. It had 5 large rooms on the first floor, besides a well room with a pump, which furnished us with water. The well was very deep and the water was very good. The house was heated by wood stoves. In the kitchen, there were brick ovens and an arch with a large iron kettle in which water was heated when a pig was killed. I imagine they heated water there for other things too, but anyway. This was the way it was when the Hamlin House was built. Of course, we had a cook stove and used wood for heat. The Hamlin House was quite a landmark and was used for church suppers and all social affairs. Alliston Gifford has written a very interesting account of what went on there. Okay, and back to the poem.
Yes, this is Alliston's account. Alliston was a Gifford, the original Gifford family, a reverend who preached all over the state of Massachusetts, but he always came back here and spent time with family, spent time with friends. And so the title of this poem, although you will realize that it's more a reflection than a poem, is The Hamlin House as I Remember It. It is a house I always loved in that hometown village of mine. It stood on an upland where one could see far out over harbor and bay. The house itself, like the folks that lived there, was straight and true. It had grace and dignity. As I remember, it was the best anywhere around. In keeping with the house was the family. It had culture and refinement. It had books and magazines. It was acquainted with places and people far away, neighbors like the folks who lived in that house. There were children, some not my age, others older, all of the better sort. One boy was my age. There was a girl younger, but not by much, and a girl a little older, yet enough so that when she spoke, we listened. Must have been Bertha. I was a barefoot boy with freckles so thick, one wondered where the boy was. I lived in a house that, like the boy, didn't have much, and like the boy, didn't look like much. Naturally, I took notice of the house, beautiful and all, but envied the young folks who lived there. In this house, beautiful, was a thought of others, especially of the youth of the village. Occasionally, the doors swung wide open to us. We went in for games and songs and things that sandpapered the rough parts in our manners. And we were plenty rough. Those were times to remember. We all grew up going to school in the village. Later, we made the school in the center some miles away. I walked the 3 miles and more, but the ones from the house up the hill were more fortunate with a horse and carriage. Then I went away, but before going, some of us gathered in the old library by the pond to form a church league of youth. Again, the house I admired, for out of it came that girl a bit older, and she led the way. It was she who lassoed me to take a part and reach for better things. The house on the hill is standing still, though some of its folks have gone away. They left us much we shall never forget. Their influence is here to stay. And that's Reverend Alston B. Gifford. I don't know really who the girl is he is referring to, but obviously she made an impression. Okay. And then next up, Lois is going to read just a short reflection from Ed Goldberg about his good friend Bill Hendel.
Bill Hendel owned the Hamlin House until he passed a couple of years ago. And he's the one that had the model built that's in the lobby. So Ed Goldberg wrote this about him. Bill Hendel ran the antique barn at the Hamlin House. He lived in the house with his mother, who had an upstairs apartment. Bill's wife spoke Parisian French, although she was from Canada. She was a milliner and met Bill through the antique shop. There were 2 other apartments that Bill rented. Bill moved to the Cape from Springfield for a job in his late 50s. He bought the Hamlin home for $28,000 in the 1960s. He was once offered $1 million for the property, but he refused. He had beautiful gardens and decorated the house to the hilt for the holidays. So Ed Goldberg wrote that remembrance of him.
Now we'd like to invite all of the actors up that are doing the choral reading.
While we wait for the readers to assemble, here's a look at the tentative list of upcoming events. You will note the lack of set dates. That information will be made public through the library's website, www.westfalmouthlibrary.org. As the readers take their seats, let's get a description of what a choral reading is.
If you've never seen a choral reading before, I'll just briefly tell you what it is. They have to bring their characters alive without the benefit of movement, without the benefit of props. And so this is the story that Bertha recalled in her 86th year. She was 5 when she started this voyage. So enjoy.
Part 1. This story was written by the author in her 96th year about her voyage as a 5-year-old accompanying her father, Captain John C. Hamblin, on the bark, the Islander, out of New Bedford, in 1871, bound for the Indian Ocean. This is Bertha's story.
Maria, it's almost time for my ship to sail. Are you coming with me this time?
That was my father, Captain John C. Hamlin, speaking to my mother. She had gone with my father on 2 previous voyages, and he hoped she was going with him this time.
My name is Alice. I am 7 years old. I was born in Australia.
My name is Henry. I'm 5 years old. I was born on Norfolk Island in the South Seas.
Oh, John, I don't see how I can go this time. There are 4 children to leave at home. And another soon to come.
Then the trunk came down from the attic. Aunt Abby and Uncle Josiah came up from Picasset to take care of the children left behind, as they always did. And suddenly, me, age 5, and my brother, Benjamin, age 2 1/2, were fitted for a whaling voyage. We're going whaling, we're going whaling.
Hush, you two. Say goodbye, dear brothers and sisters.
Bye, Etta, bye, Alice, bye, Henry, bye, John.
The bark, another name for a whaling ship, the Islander, sailed out of New Bedford, which is where most whalers departed in the 1870s.
Hurry along, children. The stagecoach is waiting to take us to New Bedford.
The family arrived in New Bedford with bag and baggage, and sailors rowed them to the Islander, waiting for them in the harbor.
Oh, I hope the sailors don't get my beautiful new hat wet.
Once on board the ship, the family made their way to the captain's cabin.
Oh, John, the space is so small. What am I going to do with 2 lively children in such a small space?
Mother was used to the big house in West Falmouth.
A replica of this house sits in the upstairs lobby of the West Falmouth Library during December.
Now, Maria, look here. We will sleep in this swinging bed, and Bertha and Benjamin will sleep on the trundle bed we will pull out from under the swinging bed. You will make do, as you always do.
On July 25th, 1871, we set sail for the Indian Ocean.
Bertha, we see whales?
Yes, Benjamin, we will see whales. No, I hope the whales stay out of sight or Papa will catch them.
Alas, the captain sent home 895 barrels of sperm oil taken in 2 years at the sea on the Indian Ocean.
Everyone wonders what we did for amusement on the ship. Instead of woods and green fields, we had the ship deck.
Go play, children. The weather is warm in July. You won't always be able to play above on deck. Be careful and don't bother your father.
First, Benjamin and I went to the cook's galley, where we hoped to get a handout.
Look, Bertha, a sea turtle.
Benjamin, be careful. He does not look too friendly.
When the children were not bothering the sailors, they spent hours riding on the turtle's back, being careful to keep away from the turtle's head so as not to get bitten. Remember, the children were ages 5 and 2 1/2 and trusted alone on the deck of the whaler. For the most part, they avoided trouble, but there were exceptions.
Ben, get down from there. Bertha, what? Can I swim? Ben, you climb down right now before Father sees you.
Little Ben was holding on to and billowing out over the sea as the ship rolled back and forth. Suddenly, a call came from the crow's nest.
There she was.
Bertha and Ben ran to the side of the ship.
Look, Ben, down go the whaleboats and the harpooners. They will chase the whale until he surfaces again. They must find just the right spot to put in the harpoon. Whales are dangerous, and their big jaws can swallow a whaleboat and all the sailors. I remember a whale jaw that hung in a tree near our driveway in West Falmouth for a long time.
Once the whale was killed, it was towed to the ship. The cutting stage was lowered, and the sailors peeled off the blubber in large pieces. The blubber was hauled aboard and cut into smaller pieces called Bible leaves, and cooked in tripods over fires on deck.
I often wondered how safe a fire was on the deck of a wooden ship. But when the fires burned all night, Ben and I would chase each other around the ship, jumping in and out of shadows.
It was my job to keep track of the names and locations of islands where we went ashore. I also had to write a daily log for each day we were at sea. I often drew pictures of the whales we had spotted in the margins of the journal.
In November, the captain wrote,
Next week is Thanksgiving. I hope the next Thanksgiving will be spent at home. If it weren't for hopes, what would we do?
One day, the sailors went on shore to an island and brought back a pail of turtle eggs.
And one day, they brought back cow milk.
Now, children, take care. And do not drink too much of the milk. I need to scald the milk so it will last longer.
Mother put the milk on the table, and when she wasn't looking, I sneaked a drink. I am dead, I cried, burning my mouth.
Come, Bertha, I have some Arabian balsam. It will help you sleep, and then you will feel better.
Sometimes another whale ship was sighted. That was a great day. The captains would visit each other, have a gam, conversation between the whalers, and dinner, and talk of world fairs and share experiences. Gam also referred to a gathering of whales.
Burning bored. Let's go see what the sailors are doing.
Hi, children. I'm carving whalebone. When I polish and decorate it with India ink, it's called scrimshaw.
I was quite proud that I was a 33rd degree Mason, so I designed the Mason emblem on whale teeth and ostrich eggs.
It is so nice to have the children on deck visiting their father and the sailors. I need to get this yarn wound around this swift and use my gagging wheel, a fork made from whalebone, to crimp this pie.
My mother was known for her pies and hard gingerbread. With 8 children and all the neighborhood children around, she didn't have time to make cookies. But when I got older, I did have time. And everyone knew me as the cookie lady of West Falmouth.
We sailed the Indian Ocean all of 1872. August 31st, 1872 is Bertha's birthday. I guess we will be spending it on a ship anchored between Africa and Madagascar.
Do you know what I got for a birthday present? My little brother, Ernest Seymour Hamlin. He was born on the ship the day before my birthday. When Ernest grew up, the kids used to tease him by calling him an African and saying he could never be president of the United States of America.
Bertha, come quick. Look what I'm getting you for your birthday.
It was a whale. They caught a whale on my birthday. Later, Father promised me a watch for a real birthday present.
Come, Bertha. Mother and I are going to meet the chief of Madagascar, and you are invited.
Benjamin, you won't believe it. The chief had 7 wives. They were dark-skinned, of course, being Africans, and they were dressed in white. Their lips were blood red from chewing betel nuts. I will tell all the girls when I get home that lipstick comes from betel nuts.
It's early 1873. I think we have caught enough whales.
And I am tired of tending 1, 2, 3 children on a whaler.
It's time to head home.
But first, we stopped in Australia. Well, Tasmania to be exact. Ben, look at this road. It was made by convicts.
Bertha, what's a convict?
Someone who builds roads.
I like the wild roses on the convict road. I'm tired of looking at water.
The sailors took the family across the water to Australia, where they stayed with Mrs. Tassel, a missionary.
Bertha, what's a missionary?
Someone who has a mission. She has Sunday school for the natives. You ask too many questions.
Here, Bertha, Mrs. Tassel wants you to have a Bible.
Mrs. Tassel has lots of Bibles to give away. I still have this Bible with my name and Mrs. Tassel's name and the date. But the words are so old and so small that I cannot read them anymore.
Well, here, Bertha, Mrs. Tassel wants you to have the songbook so that you can sing to your brothers.
Well, I lost the songbook on the way home, but I still remember the song. I want to be an angel, and with the angels stand, a crown upon my forehead, and a harp in my hand.
Part 3. The ship was sold in March 1873. Captain Hamlin had decided to give up whaling and go home. The first mate, Mr. Hiram E. Swift of Whitman, Massachusetts, took over as captain.
I was happy to see that Captain Swift brought his little girl and his wife onto the ship, but no little boy. But perhaps his wife would have a baby boy on ship who could never be president of the United States, too.
Bertha, I have a story for you. One day you went into my cabin and found my pocketbook to play with. Do you remember what you told me?
No, sir.
You told me you didn't take the white money, you took only the yellow money.
I remember. I just wanted the gold. Even at the young age of 6, I knew the difference.
Captain Hamlin and family were now ready to return home by way of London.
We stopped at Lisbon, Portugal.
And Le Havre, France.
I nearly visited those places because I have on my living room table a pretty little shell snuff box from France and a large shell that held a thimble, little scissors, and a case for needles that Papa bought me in Lisbon.
Our next stop is London. I'm so excited. I run everywhere looking at everything. Then I'm almost lost in too many people. Help, help, I cry.
Benjamin! There you are. Must you always be running? You must stay closer. I will lose you in the crowd. I did not lose you at sea, and I am not about to lose you in London.
In London, we got to go to the zoo.
And ride an elephant.
Our next stop was the Azores.
A man was selling cakes from a little tin trunk, and Mother bought a beautiful lace shawl made from the fibers of a tree. Not silk or cotton, which I still have. Must be a museum piece now. And also, we have some flowers.
Made out of feathers.
The family left home on a steamer.
Bertha, what's a steamer?
Something that uses steam. Can you ask me questions?
So we left West Falmouth in a stagecoach. We sailed on a whaling ship. We rode steamers. We returned to West Falmouth and found a railroad was built. So we rode the train home from the
Of course, when we got to the station, there was no one there to meet us. There were no telephones in those days, and no one knew when we would arrive.
So we walked home.
I will never forget that walk home. The Boyce house wasn't built then. The only house I remember was painted white with blue blinds. It looked very pretty. Our first stop, of course, was our home, the Hamlin House. We were so excited to see Aunt Abby and Uncle Josiah and our brothers and sisters, and they were excited to see us.
Maria, you do let me let that baby.
And John, Bertha, and Ben, come meet the horse, the hens, the chickens, and the 2 pigs.
Life is going to be quite different from our life on the ship in the Indian Ocean. There were hay fields in front of the house and woods to explore at the back of the house as we got acquainted with West Falmouth all over again.
But
That's another story.
Captain John C. Hamlin was born in 1829 to parents Benjamin Hamlin and Betsy Baxter. He was the second oldest of 10 children. He married Maria F. Toby, who was born in Sandwich in 1837 on October 9, 1856. Maria died in 1913 at the age of 76. John died in 1874 at the age of 44. Together they had 8 children in all. The last was Leonella, born in 1874, the year John died. Captain Hamlin spent 24 years at sea, 16 as a master or captain. In the last 2 years of his life, he purchased and managed a store in Falmouth.
So before we break, we do have hard gingerbread. I can't guarantee it's Bertha's recipe, but we have cookies back there for you. Mulled cider, cold cider, and it's all back where the exhibit displays are, so when you get up and leave, you're going to turn around and take a left and a right, and everything will be set up there for you. But before we break, is there anybody here that has a great Bertha story that they would just love to share? Or did we do a pretty good job of capturing her? Yes.
I would just like to say that it's wonderful to be here. My name is Carol Knapp Esser, and I used to live here in the late 50s and the early 60s. And I knew Bertha, and I went to her house several times. My sister went with me. And we lived here for a short while, but I spent an awful lot of time at her house. And she let us go upstairs, and I got to try on all the old clothes, and she took us up to her attic and showed us just all the old relics that she had collected through the years. And I remember my mom, pardon me, would take her to church a lot on Sundays, pick her up and take her into town. I didn't know this was going to happen while I was here. I'm only here for 3 weeks. And I have a letter from Bertha, because we stayed in touch through correspondence of letters. And being a teenager later on, I probably didn't save everything she wrote to me, but I do have the one. And I just remember her as very sweet, very giving, and I'm so thankful for the experience to know her. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I don't have a lot of different from that, Carol's sister, because I was a little younger, but I do remember picking her up for church, and I remember one Sunday bringing her home, and she stopped at the market to get a newspaper. I remember that distinctly. And I remember going to her house on Halloween, and you know, you didn't get candy there, you got cookies. And yes, I remember her scrimshaw tooth that she has in the pictures there. And just, yeah, you just felt at home, such a welcoming, warm lady. I was only about 7 and 8 years old, I guess, at the time. So wonderful, wonderful memories. And then can I mention that I brought a book that I was here in 1986 with my dad, and we found a book that one of her children that stopped at the house, I don't know her last name, but it's Ellen. Anyway, she wrote a book on Bertha. It's a little tiny paper book, and Renee has it, and we're going to try and get it online. So everybody can read. It's a great
It's a very great story.
Yeah.
And
Glad to be here.
thank you. And Milt, you had something you wanted to say from memory?
Just a little, Jess. I remember my grandmother's house was just up there where the village cafe and the ice cream shop is. Those were all in my family. And I can remember my aunt who lived in that house there with my grandmother used to go up the pathway going back over towards the parking lot to the Boyce house. She kept house up there, and I don't know what else she did, but I do vaguely remember the cookies, but I don't remember Bertha quite so much. I don't know why. I remember trekking back and forth several times during that period.
Those were the days. Think about life here in the village in the late 1800s. And it had to be just a wonderland for children. So thank you all for coming. Watch the library website for the events. We've got 2 full years of celebrating everything that is West Falmouth. I'm going to set up desserts. Make sure you look at displays. And then I have a short story group at 6:45. So I will be ducking out. But thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.